"No one owns you now," Mafia boss claimed the shaking girl sold for debt and hid her behind him. The neon sign of the Bluebird Diner flickered with a buzzing, dying hum that seemed to match the frequency of Ava Lane's headache. It was 2 a.m. in Harborview, and the city outside the grease-streaked windows was a landscape of rain-slicked asphalt and shadows. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and burnt bacon. Ava wiped down the counter for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, her movements jerky and fueled by a terrifying cocktail of caffeine and adrenaline. She was 23 years old, but tonight she felt ancient. Her feet throbbed in her worn-out sneakers, a dull ache that had become her constant companion after pulling 3 double shifts in a row. She needed the money. She needed every single cent she could scrape together from tips. But the envelope of cash hidden in her mattress never seemed to grow fast enough. The phone in her apron pocket vibrated against her hip, a short, sharp buzz that made her heart stutter. She did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was the same restricted number that had been calling her every hour on the hour for the last 3 days. Ava ducked into the narrow hallway leading to the restrooms, pressing the phone to her ear with a trembling hand. "I told you," she whispered, her voice tight. "I get paid on Friday. I will have $200 for the interest. 200 covers yesterday." "Ava," a man's voice replied. It was smooth, bored, and terrifyingly casual. "The principal is still 50,000, and Mr. Dario is getting impatient. He does not like waiting for dead men's debts to be settled." "I am not my father," Ava hissed, panic rising in her throat like bile. "I did not gamble that money away. I am trying to fix it." "Try harder," the voice said, and the line went dead. Ava leaned her forehead against the cool tile of the wall, fighting the urge to slide down to the floor. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe. 1, 2, 3. She could not have a panic attack now. If she fell apart, she lost the job. If she lost the job, she lost the apartment. If she lost the apartment, she had nowhere to hide. She washed her face with freezing water in the employee sink, staring at her reflection. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun that was coming undone. She looked fragile. She hated that. She grabbed her small, worn crossbody bag from the hook, the leather was peeling at the edges, and slung it over her shoulder like a shield. "Ava, trash run!" the cook yelled from the kitchen. "Coming," she called back, her voice steadying. She grabbed the heavy black bags from the back door and pushed out into the alley. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of city exhaust. The heavy metal door clanged shut behind her, cutting off the noise of the diner. She tossed the bags into the dumpster and turned to go back inside, but 2 shadows detached themselves from the brick wall. Ava froze. They were big men, dressed in dark suits that looked too expensive for a diner alleyway at 2 a.m. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace that set every alarm bell in Ava's brain ringing. Ava Lane, the one on the left, said it was not a question. "I am on my break," Ava said, stepping back toward the door. Her hand fumbled for the handle, but the steel was slick with rain, and her fingers slipped. "I need to get back inside." "Shift is over, sweetheart," the second man said. He stepped forward, blocking her path. "Mr. Dario wants to settle accounts tonight." "No," Ava said, her voice rising. "I told the guy on the phone. I have until Friday." "Friday was canceled," the first man said. Before she could scream, he lunged. Ava tried to scramble back, but he was faster than he looked. A heavy hand clamped around her upper arm, hauling her away from the door. She kicked out, her sneaker connecting with a shin, but the man barely grunted. They dragged her toward a black SUV idling at the mouth of the alley, its engine a low, menacing rumble. "Let me go," Ava gasped, twisting in their grip. "Please, I will get the money. I will sell my car." "Get in the car, Ava," the man growled, shoving her into the back seat. The door slammed shut, engaging the child lock with a hollow thud. Ava scrambled to the other side, but the door there was locked too. The vehicle began to move, merging seamlessly into the Harborview traffic. Ava curled into the corner, clutching her crossbody bag against her chest, her knuckles white. She stared out the tinted window, watching the familiar streets blur into streaks of light, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She was drowning, and there was no one coming to save her. The drive took 20 minutes. They did not head toward the police station or the outskirts of town. Instead, the SUV descended a steep ramp into a private underground garage beneath the erratic skyline of the financial district. When the doors opened, the bass of heavy music vibrated in the floorboards beneath Ava's feet. The men escorted her firmly toward a steel elevator. She was too terrified to fight now. Her legs felt like water. They went down, not up. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a world that made the diner feel like a different planet. It was a club, but not one open to the public. The lighting was low and crimson, casting everyone in a blood-colored haze. The air smelled of expensive scotch, imported cigars, and something metallic that tasted like fear. Men in tailored suits sat on velvet banquettes, watching women dance in glass cages suspended from the ceiling. Ava's stomach turned over. "Move!" one of her captors said, pushing her forward. They guided her through the crowd. No one looked at her with pity. They looked at her with appraisal. She was led to a raised platform at the front of the room, a small stage illuminated by a harsh white spotlight that blinded her. Vincent Dario sat in a high-backed leather chair directly in front of the stage. He was a man who wore his cruelty like a second skin, his smile oily and sharp. He held a tumbler of amber liquid, swirling it gently as he looked up at her. "Ava Lane," Vincent said, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the room, daughter of the late Peter Lane, a man who borrowed very generously and died very inconveniently. Ava squinted against the light, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack the bone. "I'm going to pay you," she said, though her voice trembled. "Just let me go." Vincent laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "The time for payment plans is over, darling. Your father's debt is 50,000. You do not have 50,000, but you do have value." He gestured to the room. "Gentlemen, the debt has defaulted. The collateral is now available for acquisition. Title transfers tonight." The room went silent. The realization hit Ava with the force of a physical blow. She was not here to negotiate. She was being sold. Terror, cold and absolute, washed over her. She scanned the faces in the semi-darkness, looking for anyone who might help, anyone who showed a flicker of humanity. Her gaze landed on a man sitting in a booth near the back, slightly separated from the rest. He was different. While the other men were leaning forward, hungry and eager, this man was leaning back, one hand resting casually on the table. He wore a black suit that absorbed the light, and his face was sharp angles and shadows. He was looking directly at her, his eyes dark and completely unreadable. Gabriel Caruso. She knew the face from the whispers in the diner, from the newspapers that printed stories about organized crime in Harborview. The Caruso crime family ran the docks, the unions, and half the politicians in the city. He was a predator among sharks. He did not look away when she caught his eye. He did not smile. He just watched her, his stillness terrifying in its intensity. 10,000, a voice called out from the front. 15? Another shouted. Ava felt the room spinning. She gripped the strap of her bag until her fingers went numb. She was going to throw up. 25,000, a rough, gravelly voice boomed. A large man stood up from a table near the front. Marcus Hale. He was a loan shark known for breaking fingers first and asking questions later. He had a reputation for violence that made even other criminals uncomfortable. He walked toward the stage, his eyes fixed on Ava with a look of possessive malice. 30,000, Marcus said, grinning at Vincent. "And I will take her now." Vincent smiled. 30,000 going once? Marcus stepped onto the platform. He was huge, smelling of stale tobacco and sweat. He reached out and grabbed Ava's arm. His fingers dug into her flesh, bruising the skin. "Let go of me," Ava cried out, flinching away, but his grip was like iron. "She is feisty," Marcus laughed, pulling her closer. "I like that. It makes breaking them more fun. Sold to Marcus Hale for," Vincent began. 50,000. The voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise of the club like a razor blade. It was low, steely, and carried an authority that made the air in the room freeze. Everyone turned. Gabriel Caruso stood up slowly from his booth. He buttoned his jacket with a calm, deliberate movement, his eyes never leaving Marcus's hand on Ava's arm. Vincent paused, his smile faltering. "Mr. Caruso?" Gabe walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for him instantly, men shrinking back into their seats. He moved with a lethal grace, silent and terrifying. He stopped at the edge of the platform, looking up at Marcus. "You are touching the wrong girl." "Marcus," Gabe said softly. Marcus bristled, though his eyes darted nervously to the men flanking the room. "I won the bid. Caruso. She is mine." "She is not a piece of furniture," Gabe said, his voice devoid of emotion. He looked at Vincent. "I am paying the debt, the full 50,000, immediately." Vincent looked between the two men. Marcus was a reliable earner, but Gabe Caruso was a force of nature. You did not say no to Gabe Caruso if you wanted to keep your business or your teeth. "If Mr. Caruso wishes to settle the debt in full," Vincent said, his voice tight, "then the ledger is clear. The girl is free of obligation to the house." "This is garbage," Marcus shouted. Tightening his grip on Ava, she whimpered, a sharp sound of pain escaping her lips. "We had a deal." Gabe's expression did not change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stepped onto the platform. He was not as broad as Marcus, but he radiated a dangerous, contained power. "Let her go," Gabe said. It was not a request. "Make me," Marcus sneered, trying to shove past Gabe, dragging Ava with him, in a blur of motion. Gabe stepped forward. He did not throw a punch. He simply moved into Marcus's space with such overwhelming dominance that Marcus flinched. Gabe's hand shot out, gripping Marcus's wrist, the one holding Ava, and squeezed. Marcus roared in pain and released her. Gabe stepped between them instantly. He turned his back on Marcus, placing himself directly in the line of danger to shield Ava. He reached out, his hand landing gently on her shoulder. It was heavy and warm, a stark contrast to the bruising grip of the loan shark. Ava was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. Gabe looked out at the room, his gaze sweeping over Vincent, over the bidders, over the security guards. He raised his voice, clear and commanding, ensuring every single person in the dark, smoke-filled room heard him. "No one owns you now?" He said it to the room, but the words settled into Ava's bones. "The debt is paid," Gabe continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl directed at Marcus behind him. "If anyone touches her, they answer to me. Are we clear?" Marcus stood panting, nursing his wrist, his face purple with rage. "You are making a mistake. Caruso, this is not over." "It is for tonight," Gabe said. He did not even look back at Marcus. Gabe looked down at Ava. His face was still unreadable. Hard angles and cold eyes, but his hand on her shoulder squeezed gently. A silent signal. "Walk with me," he murmured. He guided her off the platform. Ava felt like her legs were made of lead, but Gabe's hand moved to the small of her back, propelling her forward. He did not push. He guided. He placed himself constantly between her and the crowd, a living wall of black wool and muscle. They moved through the club. The silence was deafening. Everyone watched, but no one moved to stop them. Vincent watched them go, his expression calculating, but he raised a hand to hold his security back. They burst out of the heavy doors and into the cool night air of the parking garage. The sudden silence after the thumping bass was disorienting. Ava's lungs seized. She bent over, gasping for air, her hands clutching her knees. The panic she had held back during the auction finally broke through the dam. I can't," she choked out, hyperventilating, tears streaming down her face. "What do you want? Why did you do that?" Gabe stopped. He signaled to a sleek black sedan waiting near the exit. The driver got out and opened the rear door. Gabe turned to Ava. He did not tell her to calm down. He did not grab her. He stood a respectful distance away, waiting for her to look at him. "You are safe," he said. His voice was different now. The steel edge was gone. replaced by something quieter. "I'm not going to hurt you. Ava." "Who are you?" she gasped, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You are one of them." "I am not one of them," Gabe said, a shadow crossing his face. "Get in the car. You cannot stay here. Marcus will be coming out that door in 5 minutes, and he will be angry." The threat of Marcus was enough to mobilize her. Ava scrambled into the back seat of the sedan. The leather was soft and smelled of expensive cleaner. Gabe slid in beside her, leaving a wide space between them on the seat. "Where to, boss?" the driver asked, eyes flicking to Ava in the rearview mirror. "The girl needs a hotel," the driver suggested. Gabe looked at Ava. She was curled into the corner, pressing herself against the door as if she could merge with the metal. She was trembling violently, clutching that cheap, peeling bag like it held the secrets of the universe. If he dropped her at a motel, Marcus would find her in an hour. If he took her back to her apartment, she would be dead by morning. Gabe's jaw tightened. He made a decision that he knew he would regret. A decision that broke every rule he had set for his own isolated life. "No hotels," Gabe said quietly. "Take us to the penthouse." The driver's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." The car pulled out of the garage, sliding into the rainy streets of Harborview. Ava watched the city lights blur past the window, streaks of gold and red against the black night. She was terrified, exhausted, and confused. Beside her, the most dangerous man in the city sat in silence, watching the road, his presence filling the car. "No one owns you now," he had said. Ava closed her eyes, the words echoing in the dark, wondering if it was a promise or just a different kind of cage. Gray light filtered through heavy velvet curtains, casting long, unfamiliar shadows across the room. Ava Lane woke with a gasp, her body jerking upright as if she had been physically struck. She scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the padded headboard, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The sheets beneath her fingers were impossibly soft, crying out wealth and luxury, smelling of lavender and rain. This was not her lumpy mattress in her cramped studio apartment. This was not the break room couch at the diner. Memory crashed over her in a cold wave, the alleyway, the black SUV, the underground club with its red lights and hungry eyes, the auction and him. Ava threw off the heavy duvet and scrambled out of bed. She was wearing an oversized gray t-shirt and a pair of drawstring sweatpants that were far too long for her. They were clean, smelling of expensive detergent, but they were not hers. She rushed to the full-length mirror in the corner of the room, frantically checking her skin. She pulled up the sleeves of the shirt, inspecting her arms, her neck, her face. There were faint bruises on her upper arm where Marcus Hale had grabbed her. Dark, ugly purples blooming under the skin, but nothing else. No cuts, no other marks. She was intact. She let out a shaky breath, her knees giving way as she sank onto the plush carpet. She was alive, but as the relief faded, a colder, sharper realization took its place. She was in the home of Gabriel Caruso. She stood up and moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just an inch. She was high up, dizzyingly high. Below her, the city of Harborview looked like a toy set, gray and rain-swept. She was in one of the penthouses of the Silver Spire, the most exclusive building in the city. A soft knock on the door made her jump. Ava spun around, grabbing a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table, wielding it like a club. "Come in," she whispered. Though she doubted anyone could hear her, she cleared her throat and tried again. Louder. "Who is it?" The door opened slowly. It was not Gabe. It was an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and a kind, round face. She carried a silver tray laden with coffee, fruit, and pastries. The woman paused when she saw the lamp in Ava's hand, but she did not look frightened. She looked sad. "You can put that down, dear," the woman said gently. "I am Tessa. I keep the house." Ava lowered the lamp slowly but did not let go of it. "Where is he?" "Mr. Caruso is in the dining room," Tessa said, walking over to set the tray on a small table near the window. "He's been up most of the night. He spent hours on the phone handling things regarding your situation. He wanted to make sure everything was finalized before you woke up. Ava stared at her. Handling things? Ensuring the paperwork was filed, Tessa said, pouring a cup of coffee. Steam rose from the dark liquid, smelling rich and inviting. Ensuring that the debt is legally extinguished. He takes his word very seriously. Miss Lane. The housekeeper's tone was maternal, but the message was clear. Gabe had not just brought her here and gone to sleep. He had been working. The idea that a mafia boss had spent his night arguing over her father's gambling debts was absurd. Yet Tessa's demeanor suggested it was the absolute truth. I have clothes for you in the closet, Tessa added, gesturing to a wardrobe. Nothing fancy, just things I picked up this morning. You should eat, then he would like to speak with you. Tessa gave her one last encouraging smile and left the room, closing the door softly. Ava stared at the door. She was hungry. Starving, actually, but her stomach was tied in such tight knots she doubted she could keep anything down. She drank the coffee black, the bitterness shocking her system into alertness. She dressed quickly in the clothes Tessa had left, a simple pair of jeans and a soft white sweater that fit surprisingly well. She could not hide in this room forever. Ava opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The penthouse was vast, decorated in cool tones of slate, charcoal and white. It felt sterile, like a museum, devoid of personal clutter. She followed the scent of bacon down a long corridor until it opened into a dining room that looked out over the harbor. Gabriel Caruso sat at the head of a long, dark wood table. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there the night before, and a day's worth of stubble darkened his jaw. He looked up as she entered. His expression was unreadable, just as it had been in the club. Sit, he said. It wasn't a command, exactly, but it wasn't a suggestion either. Ava pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table, putting as much distance between them as possible. The silence in the room was heavy. Tessa appeared from the kitchen, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of Ava before disappearing again. Ava picked up her fork. The metal clinked against the china, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. She took a bite, chewed, and swallowed with difficulty. She couldn't take it anymore. Why? She asked. Gabe paused, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly. Why what? Why did you pay it? Ava's voice gained strength. She needed to know the price of her freedom. $50,000. That is not pocket change. What do you want from me? Am I supposed to work it off? Am I supposed to be... She couldn't finish the sentence. Gabe leaned back in his chair, studying her. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and unsettlingly calm. The debt is gone, Ava, he said. I do not want your money. I do not want your labor. And I certainly do not want you in my bed, if that is what you are implying. Ava flushed, anger sparking in her chest. Then why? You are Gabriel Caruso. You are not exactly known for your charity. I was at that club for a meeting, Gabe said, his voice low. I did not know there would be an auction. I tolerate a lot of things in this city. Ava, I deal in vices, gambling, smuggling, protection. But I do not deal in people. He picked up a knife and sliced a piece of fruit on his plate. Seeing you up there? Shaking. Being sold like a piece of livestock to an animal like Marcus Hale. He looked up, his gaze locking onto hers. It sickened me. I could not sit there and watch him own you. So you bought me instead, Ava challenged, gripping the table edge. I paid a debt, Gabe corrected sharply. There is a difference. You are not my property. You owe me nothing. Ava stared at him, trying to find the lie in his face, but he looked terrifyingly sincere. So I can go? You can, Gabe said, but I would not recommend it. Why not? Because Marcus Hale is humiliated and angry, Gabe said, his tone becoming clinical. He lost face in front of the entire underworld of Harborview. He cannot touch me, but he can touch you. If you go back to your apartment or your job at the diner, he will find you, and he will hurt you just to send a message to me. Ava felt the blood drain from her face. So I am trapped. You are protected, Gabe said. For now. Until Marcus cools down or until I deal with the situation. You are safe here. I do not want to be hidden away in a tower, Ava said, standing up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I'm not a princess in a story. I have a life. I have bills. Your bills are irrelevant if you are dead, Gabe said calmly. I am leaving, Ava announced. She didn't know where the courage came from, perhaps from the sheer absurdity of the situation. She turned and marched out of the dining room. She expected him to yell, to chase her, to order guards to stop her. But the penthouse remained silent. Ava found the elevator in the foyer and jabbed the button for the lobby. Her heart was racing. Was it this easy? Was he telling the truth? The elevator descended smoothly, the numbers ticking down. Penthouse, 40, 30, 10 lobby. The door slid open. Ava stepped out into the marble-floored lobby of the Silver Spire. The concierge looked up but said nothing. Ava walked toward the glass revolving doors, seeing the gray, rainy street outside. Freedom. She just had to walk out the door and hail a taxi. She pushed through the revolving door and stepped onto the sidewalk. The damp air hit her face, smelling of exhaust and rain. She took a deep breath, reaching into her bag for her phone to call a cab. Then she saw it. Across the street, parked illegally in a loading zone, was a black sedan. 2 men were leaning against the hood, smoking cigarettes. One of them was looking directly at the entrance of the building. Ava recognized him instantly. He was one of the men who had dragged her from the alleyway the night before, one of Vincent Dario's men. He saw her. He straightened up, tossing his cigarette into the gutter, and nudged the man beside him. They didn't rush. They just stared, smiling that same predatory smile she had seen in the club. They were waiting, like wolves waiting for a rabbit to leave its burrow. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized Ava's throat. Gabe was right. They were watching. They knew exactly where she was. If she walked 10 feet down the sidewalk, they would grab her. And this time, Gabe wouldn't be there to stop it. She felt small, helpless. The city she had lived in her whole life suddenly felt like a massive trap. Tears of frustration and fear pricked her eyes. She couldn't run. She couldn't hide. Ava turned around, her face burning with humiliation, and pushed back through the revolving doors. She walked past the concierge, keeping her head down so he wouldn't see her crying, and got back into the elevator. She pressed the button for the penthouse. The ride up felt like a funeral procession. When the doors opened, she stepped back into the foyer. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the shaking. She felt like a fool. Ava? She looked up. Gabe was standing in the hallway entrance. He had discarded his tie and unbuttoned the top button of his shirt. He didn't look smug. He didn't say, "I told you so." His expression was soft, almost pained. He walked toward her slowly. "I saw them on the security feed," he said quietly. Ava let out a ragged sob. "They are right outside." "I know," Gabe said. "I can't go home," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," he agreed. "Not yet." He gestured toward the living area. "Come with me." He led her through the penthouse to a sliding glass door that opened onto a massive, covered balcony. The wind was whipping rain against the glass, but the balcony was sheltered. The city of Harborview sprawled out beneath them, gray and steel and infinite. Gabe leaned against the railing, looking out at the skyline. He kept a respectful distance from her, giving her space to breathe. "This is not a prison, Ava," Gabe said, his voice fighting the sound of the wind. "I know it feels like one, but I am not your jailer. You are a guest." Ava wiped her cheeks, stepping closer to the railing. "A guest who can't leave. A guest who chooses to stay alive," Gabe corrected. He turned to look at her. "I have a proposition." Ava looked at him warily. "What kind of proposition?" "You said you have bills. You said you have a life. You want to work," Gabe said. "I own a place. A legitimate place. It is called The Lantern. It is a bar and coffee shop in the Arts District. It has nothing to do with my other business." He crossed his arms. "I need a server. The manager, Saul, has been asking for extra help. You can work there. You will earn a wage. You can pay your own way. You can sleep in the guest room here until it is safe to go back to your apartment." Ava blinked. "You want to give me a job?" "I want to give you a choice," Gabe said firmly. "You answer to Saul, not to me. You keep your tips, you work your hours. When you're not working, you are free to do what you want, within the safety of the building." It was a lifeline. He was offering her dignity. He was offering her a way to not feel like a charity case or a prisoner. "Why?" she asked again, softly this time. Gabe looked out at the gray horizon. "Because no one should have to feel helpless. I know what that feels like. I do not want you to feel it." Ava looked at his profile. He was hard, dangerous, and feared by an entire city. But in this moment, he just looked like a man trying to fix something that was broken. "Okay," Ava whispered. "I will take the job." By evening, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour, hammering against the roof of the black SUV as it navigated the wet streets. "This is it," Gabe said as the car pulled up to the curb in the Arts District. Ava looked out the window. She had expected a dark, smoky lounge with blacked-out windows. Instead, the lantern lived up to its name. It was a corner building with large bay windows glowing with warm, amber light. Inside, she could see bookshelves lining the walls, mismatched armchairs, and people laughing. Tessa, who had insisted on coming along to make sure Ava ate dinner, smiled from the front seat. "It is my favorite place in the city. They have excellent tea." Gabe opened an umbrella and escorted them to the door. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee beans and old paper. A local folk musician was playing an acoustic guitar in the corner. The patrons looked like students, artists, and neighborhood locals. There were no men in suits, no guns, no fear. Ava stood in the entryway, stunned. "You own this." "It is a hobby," Gabe murmured, looking almost embarrassed. He nodded toward the bar, where an older man with a thick white beard was polishing a glass. "That is Saul. He runs the place. I am just the silent partner." Ava watched him as they moved to a table in the back. He greeted a few people, a handshake for a young man with a sketchbook, a polite nod to an elderly couple playing chess. They didn't look at him with terror. They looked at him with respect. It complicated everything. It would have been easier if he were just a monster, if he were a villain like Vincent or Marcus. She could hate him, she could fear him and keep her distance. But seeing him here, in this warm, golden light, buying a scone for Tessa and asking Saul about the espresso machine, it made him human, and that was dangerous. They stayed for an hour. Saul walked Ava through the schedule, treating her like a normal employee, not the boss's charity case, for the first time in 24 hours. Ava felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. But the ride home shattered the calm. The storm had worsened. Thunder cracked overhead like a whip, shaking the heavy frame of the SUV. Traffic was gridlocked due to an accident up ahead, leaving them stalled on the bridge. Ava sat in the back seat next to Gabe. The interior of the car was dark, lit only by the rhythmic sweep of headlights from the opposing lane. Boom! A peal of thunder rattled the windows, so loud it vibrated in Ava's teeth. She flinched violently, gasping as the sound merged with the memory of the auction block, the gavel banging down, the shouting men, the slamming of the heavy doors. Her breath hitched. She squeezed her eyes shut, gripping her knees. Gabe shifted beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't tell her it was just thunder. He seemed to understand instinctively that the noise was a trigger. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his hand on the leather seat between them, palm open, facing upward. He didn't touch her. He didn't cross into her space. He just laid his hand there, inches from her own white-knuckled grip on her leg. It was an anchor, a silent offer. "I am here. You are not alone." Ava stared at his hand. It was large, capable of violence, yet currently still and open. Her heart was racing. But this time, it wasn't just from fear. She hesitated. Then her fingers uncurled. Her hand trembled as it moved across the leather. She didn't hold his hand. She just brushed her fingertips against the side of his palm. The contact was electric. Gabe turned his head slowly. Ava looked up. A flash of lightning illuminated the car, casting his face in sharp relief. His eyes were dark, intense, and unguarded for the first time. He looked at her not as a problem to be solved or a debt to be paid, but as a woman. The air between them grew heavy, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with the storm. Ava felt a pull, a magnetic gravity drawing her toward him. The fear of the thunder faded, replaced by the terrifying realization that she wanted to be closer to him. His fingers twitched, as if he were about to close his hand around hers. "Traffic is moving, sir," the driver announced from the front, his voice breaking the spell. The car lurched forward. Gabe pulled his hand back, clearing his throat and turning to look out the window at the rain-streaked river. Ava pulled her hand back into her lap, her skin tingling where she had touched him. They sat in silence for the rest of the drive, the distance between them on the seat feeling suddenly vast, yet charged with the memory of that almost touch. Ava watched his reflection in the window, realizing with a sinking feeling that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. The smell of roasted hazelnut and old paper had become Ava Lane's new reality. 2 weeks had passed since she had moved into the guest room at the Silver Spire, and the lantern had become her sanctuary. It was a place of warm amber light and soft jazz, a sharp contrast to the harsh fluorescent glare of the diner she had left behind. Ava wiped down the mahogany counter, laughing softly as Mr. Henderson, a regular with a tweed cap and a cane, finished his story about the time he tried to smuggle a wheel of cheese out of France in the 60s. "I am telling you, Ava," the old man said, his eyes twinkling. "The customs officer knew. He just respected the dedication. I think he just did not want to deal with the paperwork." "Arthur," Ava replied, sliding his refill of Earl Grey across the wood. She felt lighter here. The crushing weight of her father's debt was gone, replaced by the rhythmic hiss of the espresso machine and the murmur of conversation. But the fear was not gone. It had just changed shape. It lived in the way her spine stiffened whenever the front door chimed too aggressively. It lingered in the way she tracked every man who walked in wearing a heavy coat, her eyes scanning for the bulge of a weapon or the cruel smile of a loan shark. Saul, the manager, noticed it. He was a bear of a man with a white beard and gentle eyes, and he had taken to placing himself subtly between Ava and any new customers until she relaxed. "You are doing good, kid," Saul muttered as he passed her to restock the napkins. "Take a breath." Ava nodded, forcing her shoulders to drop. She could do this. She was safe here. The safety felt realist when Gabriel Caruso was in the room. He did not come every night, but when he did, the atmosphere in the lantern shifted. He never sat at the bar. He claimed a small, rounded table in the back corner, where he could see the door and the entire floor. He would sit with a black coffee, reading documents or speaking quietly with associates, but Ava felt his eyes on her, not in a predatory way, like the men at the auction. It was a watchful wait, a perimeter. One rainy Tuesday, Ava watched from the service station as a young woman, frazzled and holding a crying toddler, fumbled with her wallet at the register. The woman's card was declined. Panic flushed her cheeks as she tried to find cash that wasn't there, before Ava could step in to cover it with her tips. Gabe was there. He moved so silently she hadn't seen him leave his table. "It is taken care of," Gabe said to the cashier, his voice low. "Oh, no, I couldn't," the woman stammered, looking up at him with wide eyes. She didn't know who he was. She just saw a man in an expensive suit. "The machine is acting up," Gabe lied smoothly, sliding a $20 bill onto the counter. "It happens when it rains. Buy the boy a cookie." He walked away before she could thank him properly. Later, that same night, Ava saw him quietly settle Mr. Henderson's tab, which had been running for months without the old man ever knowing. And when a rowdy group of tourists began making lewd comments to one of the waitresses, Gabe did not shout. He simply walked over, placed a hand on the back of the loudest man's chair, and whispered something into his ear. The group paid their bill and left in under 2 minutes. Looking pale, Ava watched him from behind the espresso machine, a complex knot of emotions tightening in her chest. He was a criminal. She knew what he did. She knew the violence he was capable of. But he used his power like a shield, not a sword. It confused her. It made it harder to remind herself that she should be running away. Across town, in a warehouse that smelled of fish and diesel, the atmosphere was far less forgiving. Marcus Hale paced the length of the concrete floor, kicking a metal crate. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Vincent Dario sat on a folding chair, watching him with a mixture of boredom and caution. He embarrassed me. Vincent, Marcus spat, his face flushing red. In front of the whole city, he walks in, throws money around like he is God, and takes the girl, my girl. She was collateral. Marcus, Vincent said, lighting a cigarette. The debt was paid. Technically, Caruso followed the rules. To hell with the rules, Marcus roared. He did it to show he is better than us. He thinks he is untouchable. Marcus stopped pacing and leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. But everyone has a weak spot. I have been watching. He has got her working at that hipster coffee shop of his, the Lantern. He's keeping her close. Too close. Vincent exhaled a plume of smoke. If you touch her, you start a war. Caruso does not forgive. I'm not going to touch her. Marcus smiled, and it was a jagged, ugly thing. Not yet. I am going to remind him that he cannot protect her. I am going to make him bleed, and that shaking little girl is the knife I am going to use. In the shadows near the door, Rico shifted his weight. He was one of Gabe's newer lieutenants, a man with expensive tastes and a mounting gambling problem that Gabe did not know about. He listened to Marcus's plan, and he did the math. Loyalty was a fine thing, but it didn't pay off bookies. Information, however, sold for a very high price. The attack happened on a Thursday. It was closing time at the Lantern. The last customer had drifted out into the drizzle 10 minutes ago. Ava was wiping down the tables in the front, humming a tune that the jazz band had played earlier. Saul was in the back office, counting the till. The lights were dimmed to a soft glow. The bell above the door chimed. "Sorry, we are closed," Ava called out cheerfully, turning around with a spray bottle in her hand. She froze. Two men stood in the doorway. They were not customers. They wore dark hoodies pulled up tight and ski masks that obscured their faces, in their hands. Heavy black pistols were pointed at the floor. The spray bottle slipped from Ava's numb fingers and hit the floor with a loud clatter. "Register?" the taller man barked. "Now." Saul burst out of the back office, his face draining of color when he saw the guns. "Okay," he said, holding up his hands. "Okay, take it easy. It is all in the back." "Get it," the man ordered. He turned his masked face toward Ava. Ava could not move. Her feet felt like they were nailed to the floorboards. The panic that she had been holding at bay for weeks surged forward, a tidal wave of ice water. She was back at the auction. She was helpless. The second man, shorter and stockier, walked toward her. He wasn't looking at the register. He was looking at her. "You are the one," he sneered. "The pet project." Ava stumbled back, her hip bumping into the counter. "Please," she whispered, "tell your boyfriend Gabe that he can't keep you safe." The man said. He raised the gun, not to shoot, but to strike her. "Tell him this is just the beginning." The mention of Gabe's name confirmed her worst fear. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Adrenaline spiked through her system, overriding the freeze response. As the man lunged across the counter to grab her, Ava dropped. She didn't think. She just reacted. She grabbed the edge of a heavy serving tray loaded with drying glassware and heaved it upward. The tray collided with the man's arm. Dozens of heavy pint glasses crashed to the floor, exploding into a glittering field of shards. The noise was deafening. The man cursed, stumbling back as glass crunched under his boots. "You little witch!" "Cops!" the taller man by the door yelled, glancing at the flashing lights of a passing patrol car outside. Pure coincidence, but enough to spook them. "We have the cash! Let's go!" The man near Ava glared at her, his eyes full of hate through the holes of the mask. "You tell Gabe we are coming back for what is ours." They turned and bolted, disappearing into the rainy night. Silence rushed back into the room, broken only by the sound of Ava's jagged breathing. She was crouched behind the counter, surrounded by broken glass. Shaking so hard her teeth rattled. "Ava!" Saul's voice was trembling. "Ava, are you hurt?" She couldn't answer. She was hyperventilating, the room spinning around her. The door flew open again. Ava flinched, curling into a ball, covering her head with her arms. "Ava!" It wasn't the robbers. The voice was deep, familiar, and laced with a terrifying amount of panic. Gabriel Caruso stormed into the lantern. He had been 2 blocks away at a meeting when the silent alarm triggered. He took in the scene in a single second. The open register, the terrified manager, the sea of broken glass. He vaulted over the counter, disregarding the shards that crunched under his expensive shoes. "Ava!" he breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. He reached for her, then stopped, his hands hovering in the air. He forced his voice to drop, stripping away the rage and leaving only calm. "Ava, look at me." She looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and unseeing. "Did they touch you?" Gabe asked. His eyes scanning her frantically for blood. She shook her head, a jerky, mechanical motion. They said..." "Shh," Gabe said. He gently took her wrists, his thumbs rubbing soothing circles over her pulse points. Her skin was ice cold. "It does not matter what they said. You are okay. You are safe." He looked at the broken glass surrounding her, then at the defiance in her tear-filled eyes. "You fought back," he murmured, a flicker of fierce pride crossing his face. "You did good. Ava, you did so good." He carefully pulled her up, lifting her easily over the wreckage so she wouldn't have to walk through the glass. He held her close against his chest, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. She buried her face in his coat, smelling rain and sandalwood and safety. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur. Gabe did not let go of her hand. He didn't speak, but the tension radiating off him was palpable. He was vibrating with a cold, lethal fury that he was barely containing. When they got inside the apartment, the adrenaline crash hit Ava. She walked into the living room and her legs simply stopped working. She sank onto the gray velvet sofa, pulling her knees up to her chest. The air in the room felt too thin. She couldn't get enough oxygen. Her chest was a vice, tightening with every shallow gasp. "I can't," she wheezed, rocking back and forth. "I can't breathe." "Ava," Gabe said. He didn't call for Tessa. He didn't call a doctor. He took off his jacket, threw it on a chair, and sat on the floor directly in front of her. He was the most powerful man in Harborview, and he was kneeling on his own Persian rug, putting himself lower than her. "Look at me," he commanded softly. "Ava, eyes on me." She forced her eyes to focus on him. Everything else was gray static. "Breathe with me," Gabe said. He took a deep, exaggerated breath in. "Hold it," Ava tried, but it came out as a sob. "It is okay," Gabe said, his voice steady as a rock. He held up his hand between them. "Count my fingers. Out loud, do it." "1," Ava choked out. "Good. Again." He lowered a finger. 2. "Keep going. Breathe in. 3. They sat there for 10 minutes, the only sound in the massive penthouse, the rhythm of their breathing. Slowly, the vice around Ava's chest loosened. The room stopped spinning. The gray static faded, leaving only the sharp clarity of Gabe's face. He was close. So close. Ava blinked, her vision clearing. She was still hugging her knees, but she had leaned forward. Gabe was still on the floor, his elbows resting on the sofa cushion on either side of her legs, boxing her in with safety. She saw the exhaustion etched into the corners of his eyes. She saw a faint white scar running along his jawline that she had never noticed before. She saw the way his dark eyes were searching hers, filled with a raw, unguarded worry that made her heart ache. "Better?" he whispered. Ava nodded. She uncurled her legs slowly. Her knees brushed against his chest. He didn't pull back. "They knew who I was," Ava whispered. They said I was the girl you cared about." Gabe went still. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "They made a mistake," he said, his voice rough. "Threatening you is the last mistake they will ever make." "Why?" Ava asked. She wasn't asking about the robbers. She was asking about him, about this, about why he was on the floor. She reached out, Her hand trembled, but she didn't stop. She touched his cheek. His skin was warm, rough with stubble. Gabe closed his eyes for a second, leaning into her touch. It was a surrender. "Ava," he breathed, opening his eyes. They were dark, burning with something that terrified and thrilled her. He reached up, his thumb brushing away a stray tear that clung to her eyelashes. His touch was reverent. He traced the line of her cheekbone, his fingers lingering near her mouth. The air between them crackled. It was electric, heavy with the scent of rain and the aftermath of danger. Ava leaned in. She couldn't help it. She wanted to bridge the gap. She wanted to erase the memory of the gun with something real. Her lips parted, her breath hitching. Gabe leaned in too. His gaze dropped to her mouth. He was so close she could feel the warmth of his breath against her lips. The world narrowed down to the space between them. Then he stopped. He froze, inches from her. He closed his eyes tightly, a look of pained restraint crossing his face. He let out a shuddering breath and pulled back. Not far, just enough to break the magnetic pull. "I can't," he rasped. Ava blinked, feeling cold without his proximity. "Gabe, you are scared," Gabe said, his voice hoarse. He stood up, putting distance between them. Though his eyes stayed on her, "You are shaken up. You are vulnerable. If I kiss you now, I am no better than the men who tried to buy you." He ran a hand through his hair, looking at her with an intensity that made her toes curl. "When I kiss you, Ava, it is going to be because you want it, not because you need saving." He turned away, his shoulders tense. "Tessa is bringing you some tea. Try to sleep." He walked out of the room before she could answer, leaving Ava sitting on the couch, her lips tingling with the ghost of a kiss that hadn't happened. The next morning, the penthouse was a war room. Ava woke up early, the adrenaline hangover leaving her feeling brittle. She walked down the hallway and stopped when she heard voices in the dining room. She peeked through the crack in the door. The dining table was covered in maps and photos. Gabe stood at the head, looking nothing like the gentle man who had sat on the floor with her the night before. He was cold. He was terrifying. 4 men sat around the table. Rico was there, looking pale and sweating slightly. "I want names," Gabe said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a violence that made the air vibrate. 2 men, masks. They knew the shift change. They knew she would be there. "It could have been random, boss," Rico suggested, his voice shaking. "Just a stick-up." Gabe slammed his hand down on the table. The sound cracked like a whip. "It was not random," Gabe roared. "They quoted me. They knew about her. Someone talked. Someone told Marcus Hale where to find her." Gabe walked around the table, pacing like a caged tiger. "Find them. Break them. Find out who leaked the schedule. And when you find him..." Gabe's eyes went dead. "Bring him to me." Ava stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. She retreated to the window of the living room, looking out at the gray city. Behind her, she heard Gabe dismiss the men. She watched them leave the building from 40 stories up. She saw Rico pause on the sidewalk, pulling out his phone to type a frantic message. Ava didn't see what he typed. She didn't know that he was texting Marcus. "He's going to burn the city down. I need more money if I'm going to stay inside." She only knew one thing as she pressed her hand against the cold glass. Gabe was a monster to the world. He was violent. He was dangerous. But as she remembered the way he had shielded her from the broken glass, the way he had counted his fingers for her, the way he had stopped himself from kissing her to protect her dignity, she realized that, for the first time in her life, the monster was fighting for her. And God help her, she didn't want him to stop. The days that followed the robbery at the Lantern settled into a strange, fragile rhythm. It was the calm before a storm, heavy with humidity and unspoken words. But inside the walls of the Silver Spire penthouse, the air felt different. It was no longer the cold, sterile atmosphere of a prison. It was beginning to feel, terrifyingly, like a home. Ava Lane split her time between the coffee shop and the apartment. She worked her shifts with a new kind of vigilance, her eyes sharp, checking the street for black cars or familiar faces. Saul, The manager had hired private security, two large men who stood by the door, paid for quietly by an anonymous benefactor everyone knew was Gabriel Caruso. Their presence was a constant reminder of the threat. Yet Ava found herself relaxing into the routine. But the real shifts happened late at night. Insomnia was a shared affliction. Ava would often find herself wandering into the kitchen at 2 a.m, unable to quiet her mind, and almost every night. Gabe was there. He would be sitting at the granite island, a laptop open, a tumbler of water untouched beside him. He never sent her away, and he would just close the laptop, the screen going dark, and nod at the coffee machine. They started talking. At first, it was safe topics. They argued about the best jazz records. They debated whether deep dish pizza was actually pizza or just a casserole. They talked about the foods they missed from childhood. For Ava, it was her grandmother's cinnamon rolls. For Gabe, it was a specific pasta sauce from a hole-in-the-wall place in the North End that had closed 10 years ago. "I hate feeling trapped," Ava murmured one night, tracing the rim of her mug. That is what the debt felt like being in a box that kept getting smaller. Gabe went still. He looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the low pendant lights of the kitchen. "I know the feeling," he said. "You?" Ava let out a soft, disbelief-filled laugh. "You run the city. Gabe, you are the one who builds the boxes." "I inherited the boxes," Gabe corrected quietly. "I just made them stronger, so they wouldn't crush me." He hesitated, looking down at his hands. They were strong hands, scarred and capable of violence. Yet they were gentle when they held his coffee cup. "My mother," Gabe began, his voice dropping to a register Ava had never heard before. It was raw. "She was not a strong woman. She was kind, too kind for the men she attracted. My father was gone before I could walk, and the men who came after, they treated her like she was something they had bought, like she was furniture. If she spoke up, they broke her spirit. If she tried to leave, they broke her things." Ava stopped breathing, listening to the ghost of the boy beneath the mafia boss. "I watched it for 12 years, Gabe continued, his jaw tightening. "I watched them own her, and I swore that when I was big enough, when I was strong enough, no one would ever own anything around me again. Not a person, not a soul." He looked up, locking eyes with Ava. "When I saw you on that stage, Ava," shaking, "with Vincent reading your price tag and Marcus putting his hands on you, it was not just business. It was personal. I could not breathe until I got you off that platform." Ava felt a lump form in her throat. She saw him then. Not the myth, not the monster, but the wounded child who had built a fortress of power just to keep the helplessness at bay. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me," Gabe said gruffly, standing up to rinse his cup, the vulnerability vanishing behind his usual mask. "I just cleaned up a mess." But the distance between them had shrunk. The air in the penthouse was no longer empty. It was charged with a magnetic pull that grew stronger with every passing day. 3 nights later, the tension snapped. Gabe had been gone all day. Tessa mentioned a meeting with the rival families, a sit-down to address the territorial disputes that Marcus Hale was stirring up. When Gabe finally returned, it was past midnight. Ava was reading in the living room. She heard the front door open and close, but Gabe did not come in. He went straight to the terrace. She waited 10 minutes, then 20. The silence from the balcony was unnerving. Ava grabbed a thick wool throw blanket from the sofa and walked to the glass doors. She slid one open quietly. The wind whipped at her hair instantly. Gabe was standing at the railing, his suit jacket discarded on a chair, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He was gripping the metal railing so hard his knuckles were white. He looked exhausted, battered by invisible blows. He didn't turn around when she stepped out. Ava walked up beside him. Without a word, she unfolded the blanket and draped it over his shoulders. Gabe flinched slightly, then froze. He exhaled, a long, shuddering sound that was lost in the wind. He pulled the edges of the blanket together, accepting the comfort. "Rough night?" Ava asked softly, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "Complicated," Gabe said. His voice was gravel. "Peace is expensive. Ava, sometimes I wonder if the price is too high." "What happened?" Threats, Gabe said. Veiled ones. Marcus is making moves. He's poisoning the water. He's telling the other families that I am weak because I let a girl distract me, that I am soft. He turned his head to look at her. The city lights reflected in his eyes, making them look like dark pools of oil. I'm scared. Ava. The admission hung in the air, heavy and shocking. You? Ava whispered. Scared of Marcus? No. Gabe shook his head. I can handle Marcus. I can handle a war. I am scared of what this life does to the people standing next to me. I am scared that the blast radius is going to hit you. Ava felt a swell of empathy so strong it made her chest ache. He was trying to hold up the sky by himself. She reached out and laid her hand on his forearm. The muscle beneath the cotton shirt was rock hard with tension. I am right here, she said firmly. I am not gone. I am not hurt. You are doing it. Gabe, you are protecting me. The contact seemed to ground him. The rigid lines of his shoulders softened. He turned his body fully toward her, the city skyline becoming a forgotten backdrop. For now, Gabe murmured. He looked at her face, studying her features as if he were trying to memorize them. The panic and the rage that usually fueled him were gone, replaced by a stark, terrifying clarity. Slowly, giving her every second in the world to back away. He lifted his hand. He didn't touch her at first. He just hovered his fingers near her jaw. Ava didn't move. She didn't flinch. She looked up at him, her breath hitching, and tilted her head just slightly into his palm. Gabe made a sound low in his throat, a mix of relief and hunger. He cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jawbone. His skin was rough, warm and real. Ava, he whispered. There was no more talking. There was only the gravity pulling them together. Gabe leaned down, and Ava rose on her tiptoes to meet him. Their lips met. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't a violent clash. It was slow. It was hesitant. It was a question asked and answered in the same breath. Gabe's lips were soft, testing the waters, terrified of breaking her. Ava let out a soft sigh against his mouth, her hands coming up to grip the front of his shirt. She pulled him closer. That was the signal he needed. Gabe groaned softly and deepened the kiss. His other hand came up to tangle in her hair, tilting her head back. The kiss became urgent, a pouring out of all the fear and the longing they had been suppressing for weeks. It tasted of coffee and desperation. Ava felt her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the beat she could feel in his chest as he pressed her gently against the railing. She felt safe, for the first time in her life, in the arms of the most dangerous man in the city. She felt completely, utterly safe. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Gabe rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. His hands were still cupping her face, holding her like she was something precious and breakable. I should not have done that, he whispered, his voice rough. I wanted you to, Ava replied, her voice trembling but sure. Gabe opened his eyes. He looked at her, and a slow, shy smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It transformed his face, making him look 10 years younger. Yeah? Yeah, Ava smiled back, feeling a blush heat her cheeks. Okay. Gabe breathed. Okay. Something shifted after that night on the balcony. The wall between them had crumbled. The next few days were filled with a new, quiet intimacy. It was in the way they brushed past each other in the hallway, their arms lingering in contact for a second too long. It was in the way Gabe looked at her across the kitchen island, his gaze soft and amused. One evening, they decided to cook dinner. Tessa had the night off, and Gabe insisted he could make the carbonara his mother used to make. The kitchen was a mess of flour and laughter. Ava was trying to roll out fresh pasta dough, doing a terrible job of it. You are mauling it, Gabe laughed, coming up behind her. It is dough, not a punching bag. Gentle. He reached around her to guide her hands on the rolling pin. His chest was pressed against her back, his chin resting near her ear. Ava felt a shiver race down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Like this, Gabe murmured. Ava turned her head, laughing. I think I got more flour on the floor than on the counter. Gabe stopped. He looked at her, smiling, There was a smudge of white flour high on her cheekbone. "Hold on," he said softly. He reached out with a kitchen towel, but then changed his mind. He used his thumb instead, gently wiping the flour from her skin. The amusement in his eyes faded into something deeper, something darker and more intense. He looked at her mouth, then back up to her eyes. "You are beautiful, Ava," he said. It was a statement of fact, devoid of any game or manipulation. Ava's heart skipped a beat. "Gabe!" But the moment was shattered by the buzzing of his phone on the counter. Gabe stiffened. He pulled away, the warmth vanishing instantly. He picked up the phone, read the screen, and his face turned to stone. "I have to take this," he said, his voice cold. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving Ava standing alone in the flour, the cold reality of his world rushing back in to fill the space he had left. The news was bad. Marcus Hale had escalated. A shipment of high-end electronics that Gabe's organization moved through the docks, one of their most lucrative, legitimate side hustles, had been intercepted. The crates had been torched, $200,000 in inventory, gone in smoke. But it wasn't just the money, it was the disrespect. It was a declaration of war. Gabe spent the next 2 days locked in his study with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Elias. Ava could hear their voices through the thick oak door, Elias sharp and urgent, Gabe low and angry. "The feds are circling. Gabriel," Elias warned one afternoon as he left, pausing in the foyer where Ava was sorting mail. He didn't lower his voice. "They smell blood in the water. Marcus is making noise, and noise attracts the wrong kind of attention. If they launch a RICO investigation, everyone is fair game. You, your men, even her." Elias nodded toward Ava. "Especially the civilian you are harboring. She's a liability. Gabriel?" Gabe's face was thunderous. "She's not a liability. She's off limits. To you, maybe," Elias said, adjusting his briefcase. "To a federal prosecutor. She's a weak link." The warning settled in Ava's stomach like lead. The reality of Elias's words hit her the very next day. Ava was wiping down the espresso machine at the Lantern. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon. The bell chimed, and a woman walked in. She wasn't a customer. She wore a sensible beige suit, carried a heavy leather satchel, and had the tired, cynical eyes of a bureaucrat. "Ava Lane?" the woman asked. Ava froze. "Yes?" "I am Sarah Jenkins, Department of Social Services. I also work with the Missing Persons Unit." The woman pulled out a badge. "We received a tip, several tips, actually. Neighbors reported you missing. Your landlord said you haven't been home in weeks, and there are rumors." "Rumors?" Ava wiped her hands on her apron, her heart hammering. "Rumors that you were taken," Sarah said, her eyes scanning Ava's face for bruises, "by a man named Vincent Dario, and then transferred to the custody of Gabriel Caruso." The woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Miss Lane, if you're being held against your will, if you're being coerced, I can help you. We can get you into protective custody today. Right now." Ava looked at the woman. She saw the genuine concern. She saw the exit door. She could say yes. She could tell the truth about the debt, the auction, the fear. But if she did, the police would come for Gabe. They would charge him with kidnapping, with human trafficking. He would go to prison for the rest of his life. The man who had held her through a panic attack, the man who had cooked pasta with her, the man who had saved her. "I am fine," Ava lied. The words tasted like ash. "Miss Lane," Sarah pressed, "you are living in the Silver Spire. That is Caruso's residence." "I am renting a room," Ava said, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "I am working here. I am seeing him. Romantically. It is consensual. I am not missing. I just wanted a fresh start." The lie hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Sarah stared at her for a long time. She pulled a card from her pocket and slid it across the counter. "If you change your mind," Sarah said, "or if consensual stops being the word you would use, call me. Day or night." The woman left. Ava stared at the card, feeling a wave of nausea roll over her. She was protecting him. She was an accomplice now. That night, the penthouse was silent. The city lights outside were blurred by a thick fog. Gabe was in the living room, pouring a drink. He looked exhausted. The war with Marcus was taking a toll. He had bags under his eyes, and his movements were heavy. Ava walked in. She didn't sit down. She stood in the center of the room, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "A social worker came to the lantern today," she said. Gabe froze. He set the glass down slowly. "Did she?" "She asked if I was being held against my will," Ava said, her voice trembling. "She asked about you. She wanted to take me into protective custody." Gabe turned around. His face was a mask of controlled neutrality. "What did you tell her?" "I lied," Ava whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I told her I was your girlfriend. I told her I was renting a room. I protected you." Gabe closed his eyes, letting out a harsh breath. "Ava, is this what it is going to be like?" Ava demanded, stepping forward. "Forever? Lying to the police? Looking over my shoulder for Marcus Hale? Waiting for you to come home with a bullet hole in your chest?" "It is temporary," Gabe said, though he didn't sound convinced. "I am handling Marcus." "You are not handling it," Ava cried. "He burned your shipment. He's baiting you. And the lawyer and—" "I heard him. Gabe, the feds are watching. If you make one wrong move, this whole thing collapses." She crossed the room and grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Stop," she pleaded. "Just stop. You have enough money. You have businesses that are legal. Why do you have to keep doing the other stuff? Why do you have to be the king of Harborview?" Gabe looked down at her, his expression tortured. "It is not that simple. Ava, you do not just hand in a resignation letter to the Mafia. If I step down, a vacuum opens up. Men like Marcus, men like Vincent, they fill that vacuum, and without me to keep them in check, this city burns. Innocent people get hurt." "You're getting hurt!" Ava shouted, a tear finally escaping and tracking down her cheek. "I don't care about the city. Gabe, I care about you." The confession hung in the air. Gabe stared at her, stunned. "I don't want to lose you to this," Ava whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't do it. I can't watch you die by inches. Please, there has to be a way out." Gabe looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes, but he also saw the love that was fueling it. She wasn't asking him to save her anymore. She was asking him to save himself. For the first time in 20 years, the foundation of his resolve cracked. He had always told himself that he stayed in the life to protect people. But looking at Ava, he realized that the life was the very thing endangering the only person he truly wanted to protect. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a romantic embrace. It was a desperate cling for survival. He buried his face in her hair. "I don't know how," Gabe whispered into the silence of the room. "I don't know how to walk away. We will figure it out," Ava sobbed into his chest. "We have to—" Gabe held her, staring out at the foggy city. The seed of doubt had been planted, deep and irrevocable. He knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he couldn't have both the crown and the girl. And for the first time, the crown felt incredibly heavy. The silence of the back road was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. One moment. Gabriel Caruso was in the back seat of his armored sedan, reviewing a digital ledger on his tablet. The next, the world tilted violently on its axis. A deafening boom erupted from the front of the convoy, lifting the lead SUV into the air like a child's toy. It crashed down in a shower of sparks and twisted metal, blocking the narrow two-lane road that wound through the industrial outskirts of Harborview. "Ambush!" the driver screamed, wrenching the wheel hard to the left. Gabe did not flinch. His instincts, honed by 2 decades of survival in a violent ecosystem, took over before his conscious mind could catch up. He braced his arm against the doorframe just as the sedan slammed into the guardrail. Bullets began to rain down on them. They pinged against the reinforced glass like hail, spiderwebbing the windows but not penetrating. "Get down," his security chief. Marco roared from the front seat, drawing his weapon. "They knew the route," Gabe hissed, his eyes scanning the tree line where the muzzle flashes were sparking in the darkness. Cold fury pooled in his stomach. Heavier than the fear, We changed this route 10 minutes ago. Only 3 people knew. The realization was a physical blow. There was a rat in his inner circle. Gabe's men were spilling out of the cars, returning fire with disciplined precision. The air filled with the acrid scent of burning rubber and gunpowder. A bullet found a weak point in the door seal near Gabe's head. Sending a spray of metal fragments slicing across his forehead, he felt the warm trickle of blood, but he ignored it. He kicked his door open, staying low, and moved into the cover of the vehicle's engine block. He pulled his own weapon, checking the sight lines. This was not a random hit. This was an execution attempt, and it had Marcus Hale's sloppy, aggressive signature written all over it. "Clear the road," Gabe shouted over the din of gunfire. "Push through. Do not let them box us in." His men rallied, their suppressed fire forcing the attackers back into the woods. The driver of the third car rammed the burning wreckage of the lead SUV, shoving it just enough to create a gap. "Boss, get in!" Marco yelled. Gabe dove into the back seat of the third car. They peeled away, tires screeching on the asphalt, leaving the ambush behind in a cloud of smoke and confusion. Gabe pressed a handkerchief to his bleeding forehead, his mind racing not with relief, but with a terrifying calculation. If they knew his route, they knew everything. And if they knew everything, they knew about Ava. When Gabe walked into the penthouse 40 minutes later, he looked like a man who had walked through fire. His suit jacket was torn, his white shirt was stained with soot, and blood had dried in a dark, jagged line from his hairline to his eyebrow. Ava was in the living room, pacing. She had been waiting for him to come home for dinner. When she saw him, the color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. "Gabe!" She crossed the room in 3 strides, her hands hovering over him, terrified to touch him in case he was broken. "Oh my God, you are bleeding. What happened?" "It looks worse than it is," Gabe said. His voice was hoarse, but he tried to force a smile for her. It didn't reach his eyes. "Just a disagreement on the turnpike. I have had worse shaving cuts." "Sit down," Ava ordered, her voice trembling. She grabbed his arm and guided him to the sofa. "I will get the first aid kit." She ran to the bathroom and returned with a box of supplies. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the antiseptic bottle twice. Gabe reached out and caught her wrist gently, stopping her frantic movements. "Ava," he said softly, "breathe." "Do not tell me to breathe," she snapped, tears welling in her eyes. "Someone tried to kill you. Again." She soaked a cotton pad and began to dab at the cut on his forehead. The sting was sharp, but Gabe barely felt it. He was too busy watching her face. She was terrified, not for herself, but for him. The realization twisted the knife of guilt deeper into his gut. "You have a very hard head," Ava murmured, her voice cracking as she applied a butterfly bandage. "I suppose that is good for something. It has kept me alive this long," Gabe joked weakly. Ava pulled back, her hands resting on his chest. She could feel his heart beating, a strong, steady rhythm that defied the violence he had just survived. She looked at the blood on his shirt, and something inside her broke. "Why?" she asked. The word was heavy, laden with weeks of suppressed fear. Gabe sighed, leaning his head back against the sofa cushions. "Ava, we talked about this." "No, we talked around it," Ava argued, her voice rising. "We talked about bad men and difficult choices. We did not talk about bullets flying through your window. We did not talk about you coming home covered in blood." She stood up, backing away from him as if the violence on him was contagious. "Why are you still choosing this? You have enough money, Gabe. You have the businesses. You could walk away. We could go somewhere else. Anywhere else." Gabe sat up, the pain in his head throbbing in time with his pulse. The ambush had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. The traitor was still out there. Marcus was escalating and looking at Ava, seeing the terror he had put in her eyes. He felt cornered. "It is not that simple," Gabe snapped, his patience fraying. "I cannot just pack a bag and move to the suburbs. Ava, this is who I am. This is what I do. I hold this city together. If I leave, it collapses." "Let it collapse," Ava screamed. "I don't care about the city. I care about you. I care about us." "There is no us if I am dead," Gabe roared back, standing up. The sudden movement made the room spin. "And there is no us if Marcus Hale puts a bullet in your head because you are standing next to me." The room fell silent. The words hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Gabe ran a hand through his hair, wincing as he grazed the wound. He looked at her, his expression closing off, retreating behind the walls he had built to survive. "Maybe Elias was right," Gabe said quietly. The words tasted like ash. "Maybe it is not safe for you here. You should leave town, Ava, just for a while, until this settles down. Go to the coast. Go somewhere Marcus cannot find you." He meant it as an act of protection. He meant, "I love you too much to let you die." But Ava heard rejection. She heard the man she had fallen for telling her that she was a liability, a burden he could no longer carry. "You are sending me away?" she whispered. "I'm trying to keep you alive," Gabe said, unable to look at her. "No," Ava said, her voice trembling with hurt. "You are choosing the life. You are choosing the violence over me. You just said no one owns you. Gabe, but this life owns you. Completely." She turned and ran toward the hallway. "Ava," Gabe called out, taking a step after her. But the door to the guest room slammed shut, followed by the click of a lock. Gabe stood in the middle of the living room, bleeding and alone. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Marco. They had found a lead on the ambush vehicle. Gabe looked at the closed door, torn between the woman he loved and the war he had to fight, with a curse. He turned and walked toward his study. He would fix the mess outside first. Then, when she was safe, he would beg for her forgiveness. It was a logical decision. It was the worst mistake of his life. 2 hours later, Ava was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at her packed bag. She wasn't going to leave town. She just needed air. She needed to get out of this penthouse that felt suffocatingly high above the real world. She wiped her eyes and grabbed her phone. She would go to the lantern. It was late, but Saul would be there, closing up. She could sit in the back office, smell the coffee beans, and remember what normal life felt like. She slipped out of the room. The penthouse was quiet. Gabe was in the study. She could hear him shouting at someone on the phone. She didn't say goodbye. She took the elevator down to the lobby and hailed a cab. The lantern was closed, the lights dimmed. Ava unlocked the side door and slipped inside. It was empty. Saul must have already left. She sat on a stool behind the counter, resting her head in her hands. A knock on the glass startled her. She looked up. Rico was standing outside the door, his face pale and frantic. He was wearing a hoodie, looking over his shoulder. Ava hesitated. She didn't like Rico. There was something shifty about his eyes, but he was one of Gabe's lieutenants. She unlocked the door. "Rico? What is it?" Rico pushed inside, breathless. "Ava, you have to come with me, now." "What? Why?" "It is Gabe," Rico said. "The feds hit the penthouse. 5 minutes after you left. They have him. Ava. They arrested him." Ava's heart stopped. "Arrested? No. He was just there. I just saw him." "They were waiting for the warrant," Rico lied, his voice high and fast. "They are sweeping everyone up. Elias called me. He said they have a warrant for you, too. Something about being an accomplice." "Me?" Ava gasped. "We have to go." Rico grabbed her arm. "I have a car out back. I'm supposed to take you to the safe house until the lawyers can fix this. If they book you, Marcus Hale will have people in the holding cells waiting for you." The threat of Marcus, combined with the terror of Gabe being taken, short-circuited her instincts. She didn't question why Rico was sweating. She didn't question why he wouldn't look her in the eye. "Okay," she said, grabbing her bag. "Okay, let's go." She followed him out the back door into the alley. A nondescript gray van was idling there. Rico slid the side door open. "Get in, quick," he urged. Ava stepped up into the van the moment her foot hit the floorboard. She knew she had made a mistake. The van didn't smell like Gabe's cars. It smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap cologne. She tried to step back, but Rico shoved her hard from behind. "Sorry, sweetheart," Rico muttered. "I got debts to pay." Ava stumbled forward, falling onto the metal floor. She looked up and froze, sitting on the bench seat, smiling a smile that didn't reach his dead eyes. Was Marcus Hale? "Hello," Property, Marcus said. Ava scrambled backwards, screaming, but the door slammed shut, sealing her in the darkness. You, Ava breathed, her blood turning to ice. Rico said Gabe was arrested. Rico says a lot of things when I pay him enough. Marcus laughed. He leaned forward and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. Gabe is fine, for now, but he is going to be very, very upset when he realizes he lost his little bird. Rico climbed into the front seat. I did my part. Marcus, where's the money? Drive, Marcus ordered. You get paid when we get to the docks. The warehouse was a cavernous, rotting skeleton of a building on the abandoned side of the harbor. The air was thick with the smell of brine and rust. Marcus shoved Ava into a wooden chair in the center of the floor. He didn't use ropes. He used plastic zip ties, binding her wrists tightly behind her back. The plastic bit into her skin, cutting off her circulation. He set up a single, harsh work light, pointing it directly at her face. It blinded her, leaving the rest of the warehouse in shadow. Please, Ava whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. You don't have to do this. Gabe will pay you. Whatever you want. Gabe has nothing I want, Marcus sneered, pacing the edge of the light. Except his pride, and I am going to take that from him tonight. He stopped in front of her, leaning down. You think you are special, don't you? You think he saved you because he loves you? Ava stayed silent, staring at his boots. He saved you because of his ego, Marcus spat. Just like your father. Did you know about that, your daddy? Ava looked up. What about him? He didn't borrow that money from Vincent, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. Vincent bought the debt later. Your father came to me first. He sat in this exact chair, crying about his bad luck. I lent him the money, and when he couldn't pay, I broke his legs. Vincent only finished the job. Ava felt the room spin. Her father had sat here. Her father had bled here. It is a cycle. Ava, Marcus grinned, seeing the horror in her eyes. Round and round it goes. Your father belonged to me, and now you belong to me. And when Gabe walks through those doors, he is going to watch me break what is mine. Back at the Silver Spire, the world was ending. Gabe walked out of his study, rubbing his temples. He had finally coordinated the response to the ambush. Now he needed to fix things with Ava. Ava, he called out softly, knocking on the guest room door. No answer. He tried the handle. It was unlocked. He pushed it open. The room was empty. The closet door was open, clothes missing. Panic. Cold and sharp. Pricked at his skin. Tessa! Gabe shouted. The housekeeper appeared from the hallway, looking alarmed. Sir? Where is she? I thought she was in her room, sir. Gabe sprinted to the security room. He threw the guard out of the chair and rewinded the footage. He saw Ava leaving the elevator. He saw her get into a cab. Track her phone, Gabe ordered Marco, who had just run in. Now, Marco typed furiously. Signal is dead, boss. Last ping was... The lantern. Gabe pulled up the external feeds for the lantern. He fast-forwarded through the empty hours. Then he stopped. He saw Rico. He saw Ava open the door. He saw the brief conversation, the fear on her face. He saw them walk to the alley, and then he saw the gray van. Gabe stood up. A sound ripped from his throat, a primal, animalistic roar of pure rage. He turned and punched the drywall beside the monitors. His fist went straight through the plaster and lath, the impact vibrating up his shoulder, but he didn't feel it. Rico! Gabe snarled. The name was a curse. Boss, Marco said, his face pale. Rico has been asking for advances for weeks. We thought it was gambling. He sold her, Gabe said, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. He pulled his fist out of the wall, dust crumbling from his knuckles. He sold her to Marcus. We need to find them, Marco said. I will get the crew. No, Gabe said. He walked to the desk where they kept the insurance files, the blackmail material on everyone in the city. He pulled a thin, dusty ledger from the bottom of a stack. It was an old doc manifesto. Marcus owns a warehouse in Sector 4, Gabe said, his eyes scanning the pages. He uses it for disposal. That is where he took her father. We roll heavy, Marco said, racking the slide of his pistol. We burn it to the ground. Gabe paused. He closed his eyes. He saw Ava's face. He heard her voice from hours ago. I don't want to lose you to this. If he went in with a tactical team, guns blazing, it would be a war zone. Marcus would use Ava as a shield, a stray bullet, a panic trigger pull. She would die. Gabe opened his eyes. They were clear. No, Gabe said. Stand down. What? Marco stared at him. Boss, he has Ava. You can't be serious. Get the men to the perimeter, Gabe ordered. Surround the building, but do not engage. Do not fire unless I give the signal. You are going in alone? Marco asked. Incredulous. That is suicide. If I don't walk in there myself, Gabe said, picking up a small ceramic knife from the desk and sliding it into his boot. She doesn't walk out. He grabbed his jacket. He wants me. He wants to prove he owns me. I am going to let him think he does. The warehouse was silent except for the dripping of water from a rusted pipe. Ava's head hung low. She was exhausted. Her wrists screamed in pain. He's not coming, Marcus taunted from the shadows. He's probably halfway to the airport by now. Smart men cut their losses. He will come, Ava whispered. She didn't know why she believed it, but she did. Suddenly, the heavy metal sliding door at the far end of the warehouse groaned. Marcus spun around, raising his gun. Showtime! Footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. Marcus, a voice called out. It wasn't angry. It wasn't shouting. It was calm. I hear you were looking for a trade. Ava's head snapped up. Gabe! Marcus grabbed Ava's hair, yanking her head back and pressing the barrel of his gun against her temple. Take one more step and I paint the wall with her. Gabriel Caruso stepped into the pool of harsh light. He was alone. He wore no armor. His hands were raised high above his head, palms open, showing he held no weapon. His jacket was open, revealing his white shirt, stained with fresh blood from his ambush wound and the dust from the wall he had punched. He looked at Marcus for a split second, dismissing him entirely. Then his eyes locked onto Ava. His face was set in a mask of terrified resolve. He looked at the gun against her head, and for the first time, Ava saw fear in him. Real, paralyzing fear. But beneath it was something stronger. I am here, Gabe said, his voice steady. Let her go. You are insane. Marcus laughed, a nervous edge to his voice. You came alone? You wanted to break me, Gabe said, taking a slow step forward, his hands still raised. Here I am. Break me. But she walks out that door. No one walks out until I say so, Marcus screamed. Gabe ignored him. He kept his eyes fixed on Ava, telegraphing a silent message with his gaze. Trust me, no one owns her, Gabe said softly, repeating the promise he had made the night they met. Not you, not the debt, not even me. He took another step. Stop, Marcus yelled, cocking the hammer of the gun. Gabe stopped. He was 10 feet away. He was defenseless. He was offering himself up as a sacrifice to the very violence he had sworn to protect her from. And in the silence that followed, the only sound was the clicking of the safety being disengaged. The warehouse air was stagnant, thick with the smell of rust and the metallic tang of impending violence. Dust motes danced in the cone of the harsh halogen work light that pinned Gabriel Caruso and Ava Lane in its glare. Gabe stood 10 feet away from the woman he loved. His hands were raised, his chest heaving slightly from the adrenaline of the ambush, but his feet were planted in the concrete like roots of an old oak. He did not look at the gun Marcus Hale was waving around. He did not look at the 3 other armed men stepping out of the shadows, their weapons trained on his heart. He looked only at Ava. She was strapped to a wooden chair, her wrists bound behind her back with plastic zip ties that cut into her skin. Her face was pale, streaked with grime and tears, but her eyes were locked on his. In that silent exchange, a conversation passed between them that no one else could hear. I am here. I know. I am not leaving without you. So touching, Marcus sneered. Stepping into the light, he looked manic, his eyes wide with the intoxication of absolute power. Romeo and Juliet in the impound lot. I should charge admission, Let her go. Marcus, Gabe said. His voice was low, devoid of the begging Marcus wanted to hear. "You have me. That is the prize. She's just a waitress. She's nothing to you." "She is everything to you," Marcus corrected, circling Gabe like a shark. "And that makes her valuable." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a digital recorder and a thick manila envelope. He tossed them onto a crate near Ava. "You think I just want to kill you, Caruso?" Marcus laughed, a jagged sound that echoed off the corrugated metal walls. "That is too easy. Dead men become martyrs. No, I want to bury you first." He pointed to the envelope. "Recordings, ledgers, photos, 10 years of your family's business. Every bribe, every shipment, every body. I have been collecting it, buying it from rats like Rico." Gabe's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "I'm going to kill you tonight," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And tomorrow morning, this packet lands on the desk of the FBI field office. They will tear apart whatever is left of your empire. Your men, your assets, your legacy. It all burns. You die a criminal, and you leave nothing behind but ash." Gabe shifted his weight, moving an inch closer to Ava. "If you send that to the feds, you burn yourself too. Marcus, you are in those ledgers. You are on those tapes. If I go down, the vacuum pulls everyone in. The balance in Harborview collapses, the unions, the docks. It all turns into chaos. I like chaos," Marcus grinned. "Chaos is where I make my money. You will be hunted, Gabe warned, taking another subtle step. "By the law, by the other families. You think Vincent will protect you? He will sell you out to save his own skin before your body is cold." While they argued, Ava was fighting her own battle. The panic that usually paralyzed her was there, scratching at the back of her throat, but she pushed it down. She closed her eyes for a split second, hearing Gabe's voice in her memory from the night of the robbery. "Count my fingers. 1, 2, 3. She inhaled through her nose. Slow and deep, she exhaled. She twisted her wrists. The zip ties were tight, biting into the bone, but the plastic was cheap. She felt the locking mechanism digging into her skin. If she could just twist it the right way, apply enough torque. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain, and worked her hands. Friction burned her skin. She kept her eyes on Marcus, watching his rhythm. Every time he looked at Gabe, she pulled. Every time he looked at her, she froze. "You talk too much. Caruso," Marcus snapped. Agitated by Gabe's lack of fear, he turned to Ava, annoyed by her silence. "And you are too quiet. Scream for him. Beg him to save you." Ava looked up at him, her chin high. "No." The defiance broke Marcus. He snarled and backhanded her across the face. The sound of the strike was louder than a gunshot. Ava's head snapped to the side, a cry of pain escaping her lips as her lips split. That sound ignited the wildfire inside Gabriel Caruso. The calculation vanished. The restraint evaporated. There was only red. "No!" Gabe roared. He lunged. He covered the distance between them in a blur of motion that defied physics. Marcus tried to bring the gun up, but he was too slow. Gabe crashed into him like a freight train, his shoulder driving into Marcus's chest. The impact sent them both flying backward into a stack of empty crates. Wood splintered and cracked. The gun skidded across the concrete floor, spinning away into the darkness. "Kill him!" Marcus screamed. Scrambling to get out from under Gabe, chaos erupted. Two of Marcus's men rushed forward. One tried to aim his pistol, but Gabe used Marcus as a human shield, rolling them both over so Marcus took the brunt of the kick aimed at Gabe's ribs. Gabe abandoned defense. He was a whirlwind of violence. He drove his elbow into Marcus's nose, shattering cartilage, then spun to catch the second attacker's wrist, twisting it until the bone snapped and the weapon dropped. But he was outnumbered 3-1. A heavy boot caught Gabe in the stomach, doubling him over. Another blow struck his temple, reopening the wound from the ambush. Blood poured down his face, blinding him in one eye. Ava screamed, adrenaline surging through her veins. She yanked her wrists apart with every ounce of hysterical strength she possessed. Snap! The plastic tie gave way. Ava didn't waste a second rubbing her bruised wrists. She threw herself off the chair, scrambling on her hands and knees across the dirty floor. She saw the glint of metal near the wall. Marcus's gun. She grabbed it. It was heavy, cold, and terrified her more than anything she had ever held. "Back off," Ava screamed. She raised the weapon with both hands, pointing it at the ceiling, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The deafening crack echoed through the warehouse, freezing everyone in place. Dust rained down from the rafters. The men turned, shocked to see the shaking girl holding a hand cannon with a look of ferocious determination on her face. "Let him go!" Ava yelled, her voice raw. The distraction bought Gabe the second he needed. He swept the leg of the man standing over him, sending him crashing to the floor. Gabe scrambled up, panting, blood dripping from his chin. But Marcus was not done. He had crawled away during the confusion and pulled a knife from his boot. He lunged at Gabe's exposed back. "Gabe!" Ava shrieked. Gabe turned, catching Marcus's forearm, but the momentum drove them both into the metal wall. They wrestled for the blade, grunting with exertion. Meanwhile, the third gunman, recovering from his shock, raised his weapon. He wasn't aiming at Ava. He was aiming at the back of Gabe's head. Ava saw the barrel rise. She saw the finger tighten on the trigger. She didn't think. She didn't weigh the morality. She didn't count to 3. She leveled the heavy gun, aimed at the man's shoulder, and squeezed. The recoil nearly dislocated her shoulder. The sound was thunderous. The gunman spun around, clutching his shoulder as red bloomed on his jacket. He screamed, dropping his weapon and falling to his knees. Ava dropped the gun, her hands flying to her mouth, shock washing over her. She had shot someone. She had pulled the trigger, but Gabe was still alive. The sound of the gunshot was the signal the world was waiting for. The heavy bay doors of the warehouse burst open with a screech of metal. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" It wasn't Marco. It wasn't Gabe's crew. It was a tactical team clad in windbreakers with bold yellow letters. FBI. Gabe froze, still pinning Marcus against the wall. Marcus's eyes went wide. "You called the feds? You rat!" "I didn't call them," Gabe hissed, realizing what was happening. "Elias did." The distraction was enough. Marcus headbutted Gabe, breaking his hold, and scrambled sideways, grabbing Ava. He pulled her against his chest, the knife pressed to her throat. "Back off," Marcus screamed at the advancing agents. "I will cut her. I swear I will cut her." The agents halted, weapons trained. The standoff had returned, but the stakes were higher. Gabe stood between the agents and Marcus, his hands raised again. He was bleeding, bruised, and swaying on his feet, but his eyes were clear. "It is over." "Marcus," Gabe said, his voice calm amidst the shouting. "Look around. There is nowhere to go." "I'm taking her with me," Marcus spat, dragging Ava backward toward a side exit. Ava looked at Gabe. She wasn't shaking anymore. She was furious. She stomped down hard on Marcus's instep with her heel. At the same time, she threw her head back, slamming her skull into his already broken nose. Marcus howled in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. That was all Gabe needed. He closed the distance. He didn't punch, he didn't stab. He grabbed Marcus's wrist, twisted the knife away, and delivered a single, precise strike to the side of Marcus's neck, a nerve cluster that dropped the man like a sack of cement. Marcus hit the floor, unconscious. Gabe kicked the knife away and immediately pulled Ava into his arms. He shielded her body with his own as the FBI agents swarmed in, shouting commands. "Get down! Hands behind your head!" Gabe didn't let go. He buried his face in Ava's neck, breathing in the scent of her hair over the copper smell of blood. "It is okay," he whispered against her skin. "I have you." As the agents pulled them apart to cuff them, Gabe didn't fight. He looked at the lead agent, a stern man in a suit, and nodded toward the crate where Marcus had tossed the envelope. "The evidence is there," Gabe said calmly, turning his back so they could cuff him, "along with the encryption keys for my own servers. It is all yours." He looked at Ava one last time as they were led away to separate cars. He smiled, a real, genuine smile. He had just burned his kingdom to the ground to save his queen. The beep of the heart monitor was a rhythmic, annoying metronome. Gabriel Caruso opened his eyes. The light in the room was soft, filtering through hospital blinds. His head throbbed, his ribs ached, and his hand felt heavy. He looked down. Ava was asleep in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to his bed. Her head was resting on the mattress, her hand gripping his tightly, her fingers interlaced with his. He watched her for a long time. She had a butterfly bandage on her cheek where Marcus had hit her. It made his chest ache with a guilt so profound it was hard to breathe. He squeezed her hand. Ava stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she sat up instantly. "Gabe, you are awake. Do you need a nurse? Are you in pain?" "I am fine," Gabe rasped. His throat was dry. Ava poured him a cup of water with shaking hands and held the straw to his lips. He drank greedily. "The feds?" Gabe asked. "They took the deal," Ava said, her voice quiet. "Elias worked it out. You gave them Marcus, the network, the politicians, the judges, everything. You turned state's witness against your own organization." She paused. "They are calling it the biggest cleanup in Harborview history. Marcus is going away for life. You have probation and a lot of fines, and you are barred from running any business involved in gaming or unions." "I can live with that," Gabe murmured. He looked at the ceiling. "I have nothing left. Ava, the money is frozen. The properties are seized. The reputation is gone." He turned his head to look at her. "You are free. The debt is dead. Marcus is gone. And I have nothing to offer you anymore. No penthouses, no protection, just a man with a record and a lot of enemies." He pulled his hand gently from hers. "You should go. Start over, somewhere safe." Ava looked at his hand, then back at his face. Her expression hardened. "Are you firing me?" she asked. "I'm setting you free," Gabe said. "I don't want to be free of you," Ava said firmly. She reached out and took his hand back, gripping it harder this time. "I didn't stay because of the penthouse. I didn't fight Marcus because of the money." She leaned in, her eyes fierce. "You stood between me and the world when no one else would. You walked into that warehouse unarmed for me. You burned your whole life down for me." She brushed a strand of hair off his bandaged forehead. "You are not the king of Harborview anymore. Gabe, good. I didn't like the king. I loved the man who counted his fingers with me on the floor." Gabe stared at her, his defenses crumbling. "I am going to be boring. Ava, I am going to be a nobody." "I like boring," Ava smiled, tears spilling over her lashes. "Boring sounds perfect." Gabe let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 20 years. He reached up, cupping her neck, and pulled her down. The kiss was not desperate. It wasn't fueled by adrenaline or terror. It was slow. It was tender. It tasted of hospital antiseptic and relief. It was a promise made in the daylight, with no shadows to hide in. 6 months later, the summer sun beat down on the pavement of the Elmwood neighborhood. It was a modest district, far from the gleaming towers of the Silver Spire, lined with brownstones and oak trees. A street festival was in full swing. The air smelled of funnel cake and grilled corn. Children ran through the crowd with sticky faces, and a local band played upbeat covers on a makeshift stage. Ava Lane stood behind a folding table covered in paintings. They were local pieces, some hers, some from the regulars at the Lantern. The Lantern was still open, but now it was just a coffee shop, owned fully on the books by Ava Lane, with a silent partner who handled security. Sold another one, Ava beamed. Tucking cash into a metal lockbox, Gabriel Caruso stood behind her. He wore jeans and a simple gray t-shirt. The tension that used to carry him was gone, replaced by a relaxed vigilance. He ran a small security consulting firm now, helping small businesses set up alarm systems. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. He smiled at her, handing her a lemonade. "You are a natural saleswoman. I learned from the best negotiator in the city," Ava teased. Suddenly, a loud boom echoed overhead. Someone had set off a daylight firework at the end of the block. Ava flinched, her shoulders seized up, her eyes darting to the source of the noise, the ghost of the warehouse flashing in her mind, the gunshots, the shouting. She felt a chest press against her back. Strong arms wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her in tight. "I have you," Gabe's voice whispered in her ear. It was the same voice that had grounded her in the panic, but now it was lighter. Just a firework. Just noise. Ava took a deep breath, smelling his soap in the summer air. She leaned back into him, letting his strength support her until the tremor passed. "I am okay," she whispered. Gabe turned her around so she was facing him. He looked at her, at the light in her eyes, the smile returning to her lips. She was vibrant. She was alive. "You are," Gabe said softly. He kissed her forehead. "No one owns you now, Ava. Not the past, not the fear, not the memories." "And you?" Ava asked, resting her hands on his chest. "Who owns you?" Gabe smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had finally put down a heavy load. "I am yours," he said. Ava stood on her tiptoes and kissed him as the music swelled around them. They grabbed their things as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. They walked home hand in hand, two people with scars and a history, walking down a quiet street toward a future they had chosen for themselves. They were bruised, they were healing, but they were finally, truly free. Thank you so much for listening to the final chapter of No One Owns You Now. It has been an incredible journey watching Ava and Gabe fight for their freedom and their love. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Did Gabe make the right choice by giving up his empire? Would you have forgiven him? Let me know in the comments below, and please, tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss an episode. We have many more passionate, gritty, and emotional tales coming your way soon. Until next time, thank you for listening.